This little guy right here is the Civivi Exone. And this one in particular comes in at about $58, coming upwards of, I believe, $80, with that one being the most expensive. But let's talk about this little guy in size, in price, and all things teeny tiny. So let's talk about specs. Material-wise, you've got a number of materials ranging from G10 to micarta to this wood design here. Blades, you're looking at a Nitro V Nitro 5 blade in black wash and in satin finish, and in this fun little Damascus pattern right here too. Carry-wise, this knife is ambidextrous carry, which is really cool, and carrying this in my pocket is really nice and subtle. It almost feels like the gentleman carry type clip, where this pocket clip can go up above this point here, but you get something like, say, like a Lynch modified clip, you can get right up into that gentleman's carry range. But for now, I like this clip quite a bit. There's quite a bit of clearance on it, and accessing the knife and using it is all very easy. While using this knife, I was struck by the feeling that I'd seen this thing before. This reverse Tanto blade, this shape of handle, this general feel being from something that I had felt before, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it until this guy came to my mind. The bigger brother, the Civivi Armite, with the reverse Tanto finish, with the same opening mechanisms minus the button lock and the thumb stud here. Instead, you get this nice little channel to use for your finger, picking middle finger, index finger, preferential finger, and opening and closing, which I think is really fun to use, nice and sharp. So the downsizing doesn't just mean a downscale, it also means a weight cutting program. This knife coming in at about 5.8 ounces or 6, don't quote me on that, but this knife comes in at about 3.8 ounces, extremely light, easy to carry. If you don't want to think about it, don't want to notice it, don't want to feel it weighing you down or anything like that, this is a great option for you. At the same time, comparing the size to, thought I was going with a black one, didn't you? Anyway, the Diva Pony Stout Premium, the greatest knife ever made. Oddly enough, looking at these two side by side, I see so many comparisons. The only difference being that this one has a hole, this one has a channel. Not the only difference, obviously, but, you know, you get my point. Also, real quick, this knife reminds me a lot of the Baby Banter that was released with the red blade and the ivory handle here in G10, and I absolutely loved it, and this is like the closest I've seen to Civivi returning to that particular look, and I'm a huge fan of it. But that's just me. You could like any of these things, or you could like none of these things. That's totally cool. But let's get back on the subject at hand, like ergonomics. So, holding this knife, you obviously have a bunch of space to work with. And it's interesting how Civivi have choked up on this handle point. Like my hand can fit, but you see my pinky is floating back here over the edge. But I also can choke up here. There's this nice little groove for my finger to sit in as well and get a good grip on that. And I like this spot here, standard Civivi WE kind of design philosophy, I guess you could say. As far as proportions goes, this feels like the shortest handle that I've dealt with the blade of this kind of length. Like the blade itself runs really far down and goes straight into almost the end of the handle, whereas something like the Armite has a little bit more space to it. Like for example, if I'm holding this knife, I have this point to go out and hold here. But then let's talk about detent, or how stiff/weak the detent is. So, now, if you want to try and whiz or deploy this thing, it'll hold itself just fine. Opening and closing it doesn't take just about 1 or so pounds of force. It's quite easy and a little bit spongy, I guess some people might say, compared to the sharpness of something like the Pony Stout, where you start the deployment process and then it really just wants to fly out on you. And it takes a little bit more force to deploy, but it'll go right out there. Whereas this knife, you probably could, you almost had to send it, as it were. I will be the first to tell you that I am not an expert on knife modifications. That would belong to the members of the knife mod section of our Discord. But I might suggest that you could tighten this point here to stiffen up the detent and make it a bit sharper, though I could be wrong, and feel free to let me know that I am wrong in the comments down below. When it comes to closing the knife, obviously you can drop shut it quite nice. The blade's not heavy enough that you can, let's say, rock it back and forth super easily, but boop, there it goes. When it comes to something like Hotspots, let's say, the only spot one might consider is this little groove right here. My hand fits over it quite nicely, and especially as I choke up, there's like enough contact points for me to feel like I have a solid grip. But somebody with different sized hand, let's say, might struggle with this little point here, either being uncomfortable for some of those lower fingers, that pinky, depending on how your hand is shaped, let's say. But we've talked about blade shape, we've talked about ergonomics, we've talked about opening and closing. Now is the real question. How does this knife sound? I'm telling you, if you start a knife ASMR channel and link it in the comments down below, you'll probably get 10,000 subs by the end of the year because these knives sound awesome. Anyway, this knife, I think, has a very nice, light, crisp, sharp feel to it. It reminds me quite a bit of the QSP Canary, with that light blade feel, with that light G10 feel, except with a bit of a deeper thrum to it, especially if you get on something like, let's say, this knife here, where the acoustics of the wood might make it sound a bit more, I don't know, crisp. Though I'm trying to describe knives like they're wines, and I find it quite fun. Actually, here's an interesting question. When you get this knife, or a knife similar to it, or just a knife you like, what do you look for in knife acoustics? What do you like to hear in knife acoustics so I can better modify my own verbiage to give you better information? I want this to be a space where you can make informed decisions on the purchases that you make, on the things that you like. Let me know what you think of this knife, of Civivi knives, of this product in the comments down below. Let me know if there's anything you want me to bring up in the future, or anything you'd like to see presented in videos to come. But that'll be it for me for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.